Hey, hi, and welcome to Having Important Conversations, part of Karen Consulting's online learning series. Did you know that not talking about important things is like trying to keep a secret? It takes energy, and speaking about it frees up that energy, leaving you room to find more joy in your life. In this information series, we'll be talking about how to plan for and have conversations about things that really matter to you. We're going to be covering 4 reasons why we avoid talking about important things, 4 steps to having successful conversations, and some aspects of good communication. At the end, you should be able to plan some important conversations of your own. So we're going to switch to PowerPoint now, and I'll see you on the other side. Hi, and welcome to Having Important Conversations. Whether it's a major life change, a health concern, or ultimately how you'd like to leave this world, telling people your wishes and what you need is a critical aspect of getting your ducks in a row as you navigate change. So who are we? At Karen Consulting, we love change. We help you build resilience and become more adaptable to change. We focus on a practical approach to end-of-life planning and family emergency preparedness, things like documentation and definitely things like important conversations. Hi, I'm Gina Valit. I'm the founder of Karen Consulting. I am a change specialist focused on life transitions and end-of-life planning. And to that end, I am also a certified executor advisor and a licensed funeral services pre-planner. Helping you prepare for major life changes is my passion. Now, important conversations go hand in hand with major life changes. 2 elements of good change management are engagement and communication. It's important to remember that no plan is complete until you've engaged everyone who contributes to or is impacted by your plans. As we go through today's session, you're going to see parallels to how we deal with change. So watch for those. Now, let's look at our objectives. At the end of this information session, you're going to be able to list 4 reasons why we avoid talking about the important stuff. You're going to be able to outline 4 steps to having successful conversations. You're going to be able to describe some aspects of good communication. And then you're going to be able to plan your own important conversations. Not speaking about important things weighing on your mind takes energy. If major life change is happening, it's energy you do not have to waste. Talking about it frees up that energy, leaving more of it for solution building. Why do we avoid talking about things like serious health issues, a terminal diagnosis, our mortality or impending end of life? Or major changes like divorce, a change in job, or a move, or unexpectedly becoming a caregiver? We don't like to talk about it. We don't like to talk about change. Well, why not? Well, there are 4 main reasons why we avoid having important conversations. Fear, denial, guilt, and lack. We just don't like change. We definitely do not like to talk about loss. Let's look into these in a little bit more detail. Fear. We avoid having conversations because we fear. We fear saying the wrong thing and making things worse. We fear being a burden, and we fear loss. Could be the loss of mortality. It could be the loss of something the way it used to be. We also fear what others might say, and we definitely fear about upsetting each other, someone else. Okay, when you think about not saying the right thing or not having the words or just changing the situation, changing the relationship based on these important conversations. So how do we resolve that? Well, first and foremost, you need to have a plan and you need to practice what you're going to say. Get comfortable with the language. You're going to ask for help. Remember, asking for help is a gift to the person you ask. We all get a boost out of helping someone else. So give them that gift. Allow them to help you. Next, you want to decide which is more important, the conversation or the outcome. You want to focus on what's important. If you don't have the conversation, what is going to happen? That's something else to consider. And lastly, you want to take responsibility and acknowledge what part you play in this conversation. Decide, you know, what your behavior is going to be and that you have a right to the truth. Acknowledging mortality is healthy and improves your quality of life. And that's really what we want to get to, is better quality of life. Second one is denial. We fear denial. Well, denial is a natural reaction to change. We don't want to face the truth. So we just deny that things are actually moving in the direction they're moving until we can come to terms with it ourselves. We also deny what's going on. If it's a health concern, we believe the professionals know best, so there's nothing to address. So if you're one of those people that say, the doctor knows what they're doing, we'll just let them take care of it, nobody else has to be in the know, that's a form of denial. And then bargaining, or what we refer to as cure collusion. So focus on beating that illness, that disease or diagnosis, and that just, you're just denying what's going on. And so you've decided that you're just not going to deal with it, that you're just going to beat it and fight it, and that's all you need to worry about. So what's the resolution to this particular reason for not having those important conversations? Well, the first one is getting informed, is getting the information you need to get comfortable with the language and to be able to speak about the change with some authority and with some thoughtful, mindful points behind your discussion when you're ready to talk to the other person. Next, you want to find where you have control and take responsibility for your part in the change. Finding control is a way to reduce your stress levels when you're going through change, and it's really important that you figure out what you have control of and what you don't have control of. Next, you want to focus on why. Focus on why the change is happening and the future state and the opportunity in the change. A lot of times we tend to focus on the loss, and that puts us looking backwards, which doesn't help us at all. Okay, so look forward. That's a way of getting over the denial that things are actually changing. And then lastly, do a risk assessment. Just what is the risk of not having this in conversation? What's going to happen if I don't talk to anybody about it? It could be that they're not prepared, that it's going to be more of a shock to them, especially if it's a major change. And the other risk is that they're not going to be able to help you. So weigh the risk of not talking about it versus talking about it and come to a decision on how you're going to get past that. Next is guilt or shame, in some cases, depending on the topic. So we avoid having important conversations because we're ashamed, or we carry some guilt with us around the situation, either how we got to that point or why we're making the change or anything like that. So we need to get over it. Sometimes it's the guilt of a past encounter. Maybe we have history with the person that we have to have the conversation. Maybe we've tried to have this conversation in the past and it did not go well, and so we were reluctant to go there again. Sometimes there's an inner conflict. Maybe we're not sure how someone will react, or not sure how we even feel ourselves about the change or the situation. So we're not sure if we're ready to go into that conversation. And sometimes we have guilt over unfinished business, or we're worried that secrets might come out that have never been shared before because this topic touches on that area of our lives. Have to find a way again to ask yourself, what's more important, having the conversation or not having the conversation? Guarding that secret or moving forward? So how do we resolve our guilt or our shame around not having important conversations? Well, you need to be really clear on your motive. What do you really want for yourself and for others out of this situation? You can use a solution focus. So figure out how you feel about it, think on it, get informed, learn something that you need to learn in order to be prepared for the conversation, and then have that conversation. So feel, think, learn, and do is a good approach. The other approach is the THINK acronym. Ask yourself, the information you're planning to have in this conversation is truthful? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it going to inspire someone to help you with the change? Is it necessary? And is it kind? That's a good way to structure when you're planning to have an important conversation as well. Stick to the facts, but have empathy. And then lastly, every conversation is going to be fact-based, but there's also going to be a lot of emotions, especially if it's an important conversation around a change. So you can use the worst case scenario tool. And this is where you think about what happens if, what's the worst possible thing that can happen if I have this conversation? And then the next thing you do with that is like, what are the chances, like really honestly, what are the chances of this worst case scenario coming to happen, to actually happen? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Or is it 80-20? Or is it, there's a really good chance it's going to happen? Regardless of what the percentage is, you're going to walk through mentally that situation in your mind. What happens if the worst case scenario happens? That person says they're never going to talk to me again. Will you survive that? And how are you going to address it if it happens? And the reason that this is important to do is because your brain is now solution building for you before you've had the conversation. So in the very minuscule chance that this particular worst case scenario is going to happen, you're already prepared for it and you'll know what to do. And then you'll celebrate your success, whether it's hypothetical or an actual success, because you're going to get through the situation no matter what. So you can walk through multiple worst case scenarios. That, you know, plan A, this is going to happen, this is the worst case scenario. Plan B, this is the worst case scenario, and work through them. But keep focused on, what's the likelihood is this going to happen? How much energy am I going to expend worrying about a worst case scenario that may potentially happen 1%, right? And that'll help you get over that fear of having that conversation. And lastly, lack. So we avoid having important conversations because we lack something. That could be safe space. It could be we lack privacy. It could be we lack trust. You may not have a person that you feel comfortable, or the person you need to have the conversation with, you're not comfortable talking to. Perhaps you have a dysfunctional family and this is something that impacts them. And that lack can really impact how ready we are to have a conversation. And the last thing we lack a lot of times is knowledge on how to begin the conversation. Again, this comes down to planning and logistics. So our resolutions for these fears is to definitely plan a time, plan a place, make sure you're in the right headspace to have the conversation. You want to find, if you don't have someone to trust, maybe you find a neutral third party that you can practice with. And that's going to help you figure out what the right language is and just gain your confidence before you have the actual real conversation. Sometimes you just need to have the conversation so that you can get it out of your system and you don't have to do that important conversation with someone that you don't feel comfortable with. Find someone you do trust, find a neutral third party who doesn't have skin in the game, and talk it out with them. And then lastly, make a plan and follow the plan. There's no point in making a plan for the conversation if you're not going to follow it. Obviously, you're going to be flexible with it. You're going to go with the flow based on the other person's reactions, but it's good to have a script and some items that you want to cover, because that's going to help you stay focused and make sure that you have the confidence to move forward. So once we've addressed fear, denial, guilt, or shame, and what we're lacking, the next step is to plan our conversations. And this is a big aspect of how we are successful. Now, I'm a huge fan of the template that the Conversation Project uses. They have a very simple approach of get ready, get set, go, and keep going. And we're going to look at each of these in sequence, but this is a nice way to think about how you're going to have those conversations that you need to have. Now, the Conversation Project is very health focused. Their toolkits, their starter kits are very health focused for things like choosing a health agent, talking to a doctor, talking to someone with serious illness, talking to a child about being ill. But this approach, this get ready, get set, go, and keep going, works for any important conversation you use. So I wouldn't worry so much about the examples that are in the templates, but I would definitely encourage you to take a look at the templates and use them and adjust them as needed. So let's look at getting ready. So to get ready, you need to plan and think about what you need to think about, what you need to learn about, and what you need to do before you're ready to have the conversation. So a big part of planning is having a plan. So think, learn, and do, and be prepared. You want to get comfortable with the topic. So for example, if you're going to be talking to someone about end of life planning, you need to get comfortable with the D words, for example, death, dying, deceased. If you don't have confidence as you're speaking, if you haven't worked it out in your mind about how you feel about something, you're not comfortable with the words you're using, it's going to come across very weakly to the other person, and that may not lead to the best productive outcome of your conversation. You definitely need to get comfort with the topic and the language. And concerns, prioritize your concerns. There are some concerns in any important conversation that you want to be sure to talk about, so prioritize them and focus on those. Of course, conversations need to be organic, but it's important that you can stay somewhat on track as you're going through the conversation. Next, we have get set. So think about what matters most to you. What is the reason for having the conversation? And keep that foremost in your mind as you're having the conversation, but also as you're planning. Now, for any of my sessions, whether you're attending one of my workshops or you're doing one-on-one coaching, I'm always going to ask you to find your why. Why are you doing this? Why are you choosing now to have a conversation? Why are you choosing now to do this work? Why are you doing this? Because that's going to give you the strength and the confidence to continue to move forward. Now, in this case, why do you want to have the conversation? And also, you know, what's it all about? What's the expected outcome? You want to do a quick risk assessment. What could happen if you don't have the conversation, and what is the likelihood of that happening? And again, that goes back to the worst case scenario tool that you can use. But ask yourself, what happens if you do nothing? That's always an important question to ask you before you're going into any action. What happens if I do nothing? Is life going to go on the same, or is this something I really need to address? This is going to help you focus. Okay. Next, we have go. Okay. When you're ready and you have a plan, I need you to think about who you want to talk to. That's a huge part of determining what the framework of your discussion is going to look like. When is a good time to talk? Remember, we talked about safe space and safe headspace even. So you need to talk about when is a good time for you to talk, when are you most likely to be focused and have a lot of energy, and also the person you're going to talk to. Are they a morning person? Are they an afternoon person? Are they really busy through the week and they just can't take a deep conversation or play it on a weeknight, that you're going to have to do it when they're a little bit more relaxed on a weekend, for example? Next thing you're going to ask is, where would you and they feel comfortable talking? Some people, when it's a deep subject, want a public place because it helps them rein in their emotions around the topic. There is safety and security and anonymity sometimes. So perhaps there's a coffee shop that you feel comfortable at, or a park bench, or whatever, depending on the topic of the conversation and the comfort of the other person. Sometimes it's making sure they're sitting in their comfortable chair in their living room, and that's where you have important conversations with that person. Maybe it's at the kitchen table. You will know, based on what you know of that person, how to make them feel comfortable and how to make yourself feel comfortable when you're talking about something important. And then lastly, what do you absolutely have to say? What, again, is the key expected outcome, or what is the driver for having this conversation? Even if it's just a bullet point note to say, I need to talk about this, and you find that you might get off track because you're still avoiding it, it's always good to just plan on what do you absolutely have to say? What are those points that you have to get up? Things to keep in mind, however, when you're having important conversations is, don't tell others how to feel about what you're telling them. So don't give them good news and then expect them to be happy for you, or tell them they need to be happy for you. Let them come to the realization and how they feel about things in their own time. That means you need to support them, and you need to give them space to digest the information that you're sharing with them when you're having this important conversation, giving them that space, realizing that this may not be a one and done conversation. This is going to be something that you're going to continue to have a conversation of. And the first conversation, maybe you're very lightly opening the door to say, hey, this is something that's on my mind. This is something we need to talk to. And that's what step 4 is about. Keep going. Okay. After you've had that initial conversation, the really important thing is for you and for the other person to collect their thoughts. For you, you want to think about, how did that conversation make you feel? Okay. And then if there's any clarifications that are needed, are there any points that you couldn't give them an answer for, or that they asked you that you couldn't? Is there any clarification that's needed still? That would be the catalyst for your next conversation. Take a moment to record what you and what others want to remember. What were the key takeaways from that meeting? Just jot it down. When you're in high stress situations, especially around change, your brain doesn't always retain all the important information that you need. So just jot it down somewhere, put it in your phone, write it on a piece of paper, just so that you remember the key points of what really stood out for you. And ask the other person to give you that information or to write it down themselves. Take note of what's important to talk about next time. Like I said, this never is a one and done conversation when you're talking about important things. This should be the launching of or the continuation of a conversation. So think about what you didn't get to cover, or what you really drilled down on but had to move away from, and really write down what that was so that you can include it in your conversation for next time. And then lastly, you're going to plan the next conversation. Now, the next conversation could be with the same person as a continuation, or it could be, I still have to talk about this with someone else. So let's say the first time you talk about something, you talk about it with your mom, and now you have to sit down and talk about it with your siblings, for example. It's always good to plan the next conversation and to learn from what's just happened to make the next conversation better, whether it's with the same person or with the next group of people. You need to really consider who your audience is, the timing, the comfort level. All of those things need to be taken into consideration. All right, so you've gotten ready, gotten set, and are ready to go, or have gone already. Maybe you've started the conversation. Now, how do you keep that conversation going? How do you keep going? Well, here are some tips for good conversation. First and foremost, a conversation has two sides, and you want to keep the other person's perspective in mind. However, you don't want to assume you know someone else's story or their knowledge base. Even if it's something you think they know, just please don't make that assumption, because you will be surprised. And that's a good way you can start as well, is just ask them their perspective or their assumptions, so that you can have common ground and you have common context. You want to park your preconceived notions at the door about how this is going to turn out, how the other person is going to react, or what the outcome is going to be. You have your expected outcomes, you have a plan and a focus, but because conversations are two-sided, that may not always be the case, and you need to be open about that. And speaking of open, you want to use open-ended questions. You can use leading questions, like setting them on the path for what you want to talk about. You can use indirect questions. So an example of an indirect question would be, let's say you need to talk about your end-of-life plan with someone who you are thinking about making your executor or your emergency contact in the case of a health emergency. An indirect question would be, hey, remember that celebrity death that happened last week? That got me thinking. What are your thoughts about burial or cremation, for example? And it's not about you, it's not specifically about you to start. Maybe you gently open the door by talking about end-of-life planning in general, and so that you can get a feel for where that person's head is at, if they're comfortable talking about it, if they're not comfortable. Doesn't mean you're not going to have a conversation about your specifics going forward, but having a theoretical or general conversation to start with is a nice way to get a feel for how much comfort people have on the topic, whatever the topic is. Okay. You want to be patient. It's impossible to cover it all in one conversation with important topics and important big major changes. So you want to have some patience. Don't expect you're going to sit down and you've marked it in your calendar and it's like, okay, within an hour, I'm going to know this, this, and this. That may not be the case. So have patience with yourself and have patience with other people. Because even if you have been thinking about this conversation, have been planning it for hours, days, weeks, or months, the other person, this may be something completely new to them, and you need to give them time to catch up with the change and with the topic at hand. So please have some patience. Next is listen more than you speak. Again, that's where open-ended questions come up. This is not a one-upmanship conversation. This is like, and now we're going to talk about me, and now we're going to talk about me. Important conversations about, yes, you have information to impart, but you also want to get a feel for where people's heads are at. So listen a lot. Take notes. Ask a lot of questions. Try to get a feel for where that person is at, especially with the first conversation, right? You're not going to get down to the nuts and bolts until you have an idea of where that person's head is at around the conversation. Be open and be vulnerable. Definitely emotions are okay. And if you've ever been to one of my sessions, I always say, never apologize for your emotions. Your feelings are your feelings, especially with major change. There's going to be some emotion around it. So be kind to yourself and be kind to others and let people know that it's okay. It's okay for you to tear up. It's okay for them to tear up, for them to be angry. Whatever it is, it's okay. Set that safe space parameters with them to start off and let them know. And then lastly, be prepared to learn something new, to be okay with changing your mind. Maybe you're going in there and you're absolutely set on, this is what my funeral is going to look like. This is what my memorial is going to look like, because this is what I want. Well, guess what? You're going to be dead. And the memorial is really a kickoff for someone grieving for you. And it needs to meet their needs as much as it needs to meet your needs. So be open and be ready to change your mind, because you're never going to quite know what the outcome of this conversation is going to be. Even if it's a done deal decision, yes, I am moving, you're not going to be able to anticipate the other person's responses and reactions and what they feel they need to do to deal with the change. Okay. And lastly, let's talk about what some of the aspects of good communication are. Good communication allows you to connect with the other person. So remember that. That's why I say listen more than you speak. You're providing the topic, you're facilitating the conversation, but you want to be able to connect with that other person and make a genuine human connection with them. And that's why good communication uses body language. We want to be able to match our body language with the tone of the conversation and the words that we're using. You want to be able to see other people's body language. Now, I know when you're doing things remotely via FaceTime or Zoom or however you're doing, that can be a little less easy, but you can still see facial expressions. So watch for those cues to see how the conversation is going. People start looking away or crossing their arms. You know the signals or body language. Please, by all means, use those cues to decide how you're going to proceed. And also, good communication is respectful and honest. Please think about avoiding euphemisms, being very clear in your language and very direct. Have empathy when you're giving people the truth of a situation, but also be very clear. Try not to beat around the bush. We do that a lot when we're speaking about things that make us uncomfortable or that you think may be confrontational, but clarity is going to help everybody. You're managing expectations by being clear. You're helping people understand exactly what you're talking about. And I'm walking away from the conversation going, I think they meant this. They said this, and this is how I interpreted it. So use clear, honest, respectful language. And yeah, just don't beat around the bush. And lastly, keep your heart open. You're now ready to begin some really important conversations. You want to be patient, you want to be actively listening, and you want to be open about what's happening. So please Keep your heart open, plan your conversations, and have them. It's important. It's important to us all. Thank you. And we're back. Thanks for watching to the end of this session. There are 2 really great resources I'd also like to share with you. Information is in the description below. They're focused on the important conversations that nobody really wants to have, things about serious illness, death, and dying, but the information and the approach is still applicable to any difficult topic, so I encourage you to go take a look. The first one you know about, theconversationproject.org. This is the place with the starter kits. They have downloadable preparation worksheets using the 4-step process that I discussed today. They include starter kits on how to talk to your doctor, how to talk to your kids about serious illness, how to talk to someone about dementia, those types of topics, but usable for any situation. And second resource that I'd like to share with you is dyingmatters.org. If you search for talking about death and dying, you will get some information, some links on fear of talking, how to start a conversation, and how to open up a difficult conversation. Again, when you're talking about a change that's already uncomfortable but needs to happen, you need to get prepared for it, and this will give you some resources. You can also contact me for additional support and resources. I'm here for you. Now, at Care Consulting, we know you are the kind of person who wants to be prepared for major life changes. In order to accomplish this, you want effective strategies to get things squared away. Now, you may not have a lot of time or don't know where to begin, and it can leave you feeling overwhelmed and unprepared. I totally get that. I understand how it feels to be faced with big things in your life. We've all experienced a lot of upheaval in the last little while, for example. And I believe it should be simple to be okay with change and to get prepared for it. That's why I'm focused on making it simple for busy people to get good to go, regardless of what's going down. Now, if you have found this information session helpful and would like to learn more, please check out the website, www.karenconsulting.ca, or contact me today. You could look at some free consultation, maybe take a workshop, or get some individual coaching, or just read some information. There's lots there on the blog. Stop using your energy up by worrying and procrastinating. Start living your life with confidence, knowing you are prepared for whatever life chucks at you. And remember, if you're in a bad situation, don't worry, it'll change. If you're in a good situation, don't worry, it'll change. But hey, you got this. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.